Hey friends, Editor Cool Chris here. Aaron actually let me out from behind the computer screen to tell you about the festival that I'm putting out March 10th and 11th called SBI Fest. When I'm not editing this podcast, I run a record label called Ska Boom International, and my label and Flamingo Cantina are hosting this fest March 10th and 11th in Austin, Texas. We have 21 ska and punk bands coming from all around the country, like the Toasters, Tsunami Bomb, the Littlest Man Band, Joystick, Flying Raccoon Suit, Hans Gruber and the Diehards, Wicked Bears, Loser, Young Costello, and a whole lot more. I'm not going to list all 21, but we also have Checkered Past the Skodcast coming all the way from Canada to do a live episode of their podcast, and I'm really excited about that. So, if you are in Texas and you can get to Austin, or if you're already in Austin, head to spifest.org for tickets and more info. That's spifest.org for tickets and more info. Aaron has said that he's not going to let me have the weekend off from editing unless this sells out. So please, please go and grab tickets so we can get this sold out and I can actually go to this thing that I'm hosting. Okay, that's it. Hope to see you there. Back to editing.
The Slackers formed in 1991. Initially, the band was all over the map stylistically, but eventually they realized that they should pick a sound and stick with it. They chose ska and reggae. But rather than mixing it with punk like a lot of their peers were doing, they chose to keep the grooves traditional and to mix these Jamaican sounds with soul, rock and roll, and jazz, creating a sound that would appeal to traditional ska fans and people who just like good, new, original music. Today, we speak to keyboardist, lead singer Vic Ruggiero, and we go deep into some Slackers history.
Not a lot of singers out there like Vic.
No.
Vic has a very distinct voice. That was probably the most interesting thing to me the whole time we were talking to him right now, was listening to his voice.
Yeah, I think like there are other singers, like he kind of reminds me of some like rock and roll or like folk singers, you know, kind of like classic revered singers.
Yeah.
But I can't really think of other ska bands that have a singer like Vic, where it has that sort of like tattered, just like everyman kind of voice. I don't know how to best describe it, but it's like, it's soulful. It's kind of rock and roll, not necessarily like the most technically proficient voice on the planet, but like perfect, like exactly has character, exactly what you want from a singer in a band.
Yeah. To me, he sounds like if, like an alternate reality version of Tim Armstrong's vocal. If maybe it had not gone so punk and had been more of a crooner.
Interesting. So if Operation Ivy, that band was over, and instead of Rancid, he's like, I'm going the ska route.
Yeah, or the ska soul route, kind of.
Ska soul route. Oh, I see. We've put together a few timelines, and now it's my brain is like expanding right now. I wanted to talk to you about your song Statehouse from your new album, which I think is maybe one of the best Slacker songs in your entire catalog.
Thanks.
And I know this song has, there's history in the song, but it has a long history in terms of how it evolved into the song that's on the newest record. So I don't know exactly how you want to approach this. I mean, maybe we can just talk about the song in its current state.
Yeah.
It's got like I like that it's like you learn from it. It's like
it's a history lesson.
Yeah.
I mean, I always appreciated when They Might Be Giants would write a song where you would like come away with a little bit of like history. I feel like this song does that, and it's in your way.
Yeah, it's not exactly Istanbul was Constantinople.
But I don't think everyone realizes that the Confederacy and the Confederate flag and the statues, like they were, a lot of them came up and were erected in the 60s during the civil rights. That I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah.
To what degree they were symbols of hate specifically, not just like, because there's the line in you say, I used to think it was just history, but then I learned the whole story. I mean, I think that's kind of the essence of what you're talking about in this song.
It's quite autobiographical so far as my discovery of the whole situation. Because when we first started traveling down into the South, in the early days of the Slackers even, of course you strike out there and you're kind of willing to learn about the world, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Wow, this is interesting. Like here we are, we're in South Carolina or we're in Georgia or wherever, Florida. You're learning about things that you're like, oh wow, yeah, things are different down here. And we would see these bumper stickers that had Confederate flags, and it would say like heritage, not hate.
Yeah.
And I would say to myself, well, okay, cool, that's fine, that's no sweat. But the slackers are full of historians, and so it wasn't long before somebody pointed out to me that it was like, oh yeah, it's not that they've been flying them ever since the Civil War. And I was like, nah, that can't be. No, because I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I also know how it is in my, Northeast culture. A lot of people come to New York not understanding the little details about, what we refer to or our little cultural things. And, yeah, I went back and I started looking at it, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is like there is a real story here. And as I started, this, as you were saying, the song has gone through a couple of different. It went through a couple of different versions. One that started with Rancid, when it was a news story. It was actually a news story that it was like, why is South Carolina flying a Confederate flag in the 2000s? What is going on? Yeah, and so there you go. I went from there. The Rancid song didn't quite turn out to be on that topic only. It kind of turned into another kind of a song, which is like, more about general conspiracy and distrust.
Yeah.
In Rancid, we were all reading conspiracy books back when it was still a punk thing. Before the right wing stole it from us.
Yeah, sort of the anti-government conspiracies. Yeah. That used to be our thing.
That used to be a punk thing. When I came up in the punk scene in New York and the Lower East Side, when I first came into the punk scene, they were all going crazy about these Tompkins Square riots that had happened, and how the local governments had conspired against the community, and it was very government distrustful. And there was a bookstore called Sabotage, and in that bookstore you could find every possible conspiracy book and magazine article, and they would have meetings about like the JFK assassination. It was us, it was punk, and then to see it now kind of taken away from us and turn into QAnon or whatever, it's like really makes kind of makes everything weird.
Yeah, definitely.
The song was originally called Wrongful Suspicion. It was on the Life Won't Wait Rancid album, 98.
Mm-hmm.
My first question actually is, how did the songwriting of this work? Did you write it for them? Did you and Tim Armstrong like sit down and write it together?
Well, we had been doing demo sessions around then, and they had gotten to know the band and some of us characters because we'd been touring with them as auxiliary musicians. We had Dave Hilliard was touring as a sax player. Jeff Baker, Django, he was playing trombone. A couple of the other guys from his scene, I think Elwood Hussey, the guy that played in Stubborn All Stars, they had come on and at different times, and we were like the horn section, and I was the organ player. And so we got comfortable with these guys. We got to know their musical tastes, and funny enough, we all have a lot in common. Even guys like Dave and stuff that you would think Dave was more jazzy or whatever, but he also likes Stiff Little Fingers and The Clash.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all had a lot in common musically, and we were talking about things or whatever, and ideas would come up, but we'd play each other ideas. It was pretty natural. I wouldn't say that it was like a situation where you'd be like, okay, we would do sessions, but we would also just show each other tunes,
When you're showing each other tunes, how are you doing this? Just pulling out an instrument and playing it for each other, or passing tapes or CDs back and forth?
Yeah, like I think in the bus that I was on with them, they always had guitars laying around, and we even had a little recording setup in the back. It was very hi-fi for the 90s. It was like some 8-track digital thing that was like the size of a VCR, and like nowadays you could do it on your phone.
Sure.
you know, it was like, oh man, this is the best. We can make demos in the back of the bus. And yeah, so we'd sit back there and play, and we'd like work on tunes. And I think that's where we all got comfortable with each other, to the point where, you know, Tim was like, hey, I'm working on some new tunes. I'm working on a new record. You want to come and hang out with me? We'll get a little band together, because like all of Rancid doesn't want to do it. Like, and I'm just the songwriter. I'm like one of the songwriters. So like, we'll hang out. We can not, you know, swap ideas. And it was great. It was this great session with me and Tim and Josh Freeze. I don't know if you're familiar with Josh Freeze, but he's like a legendary.
The guy from the Vandals. Yeah.
Yeah, he was Vandals. He plays with Devo. He's like a ringer of all, you know, kind of like, I would say beyond punk. He's just like one of those bizarro guys that just has magic in his hands, you know?
Yeah.
You know, a bit like Aura, like in a way he reminds me of, because it's like he kind of crosses genres. You don't necessarily know what he's going to come up with. Yeah, so we were doing these sessions, and yeah, I think Wrongful Suspicion, I think that I had the hook line, you know, I heard they found a Confederate flag down at the Statehouse. And then I started writing verses off of it, just kind of like on my, you know, my angle. And then Tim wrote a verse, and then Laws wrote a verse, and then we each had a verse, you know? And of course, then when you do that, it comes out to be a different kind of a song, you know?
Yeah.
But it was cool, because it was all about not trusting the government, and about how, like, you know, you can't be sure what's going to happen when you go down to the Statehouse. They got a position for me on the floor, you know, down at the Statehouse, you know.
Where were you coming from with the lyrics that you were bringing to it? Like, where was your head at?
I thought it was particularly insulting that this flag thing was happening, and so I was kind of trying to come at it from a more of a racial and historical kind of thing. But I'm not even sure that my lyrics pointed at that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the way that the song got written. We had a lot of songs like that where, you know, they would just come at it with a certain vibe, and like, I mean, obviously those guys have a vibe when it comes to lyrics, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They Rancid isn't a particularly I don't know, they don't necessarily write about politics too often. They do once in a while. Like, I think when they had a couple of songs that were really specific, but it's usually about the culture of punk. Rancid, mm-hmm. You know, they kind of do a lot of things about like, oh, this is what punk looks like and feels like, and the people that we know in it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm generalizing, but
no, I think that checks out. Yeah.
When we went back and started, it was one of those songs that I always felt I had a particular claim to, because I had the most songwriting on that song, you know, even though it like,
yeah,
it really wasn't like, I think in the end we all split it 3 ways, but it was like, it was my song, my melody, my chords, my chorus. And I always felt like we had a particular claim as the Slackers to play it. I thought, oh, this is really cool, because, you know, we really can play this song, and it really is a Slackers song, feel wise, you know? And then,
mm-hmm.
when we went back to do the record recently, it just seemed natural that the time and place that we were at historically, they were over there knocking down Confederate statues, and, you know, BLM was in full swing. And I thought, oh, well, it's a perfect moment to actually write the song, like actually really write the song. And
mm-hmm.
history's changed since the song was engendered originally, right? Because back then it was like, I hear they fly a Confederate flag. And when I went and looked up the story, it was actually in 2015, they had taken it down. An activist had gone up and taken the flag down, and then it never went back up, because law was passed immediately after that kept it down. And I don't know if it was concurrent or whatever the situation was, but it was cool. And I was like, hey, wow, I could actually make a different song out of this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, initially, yeah, the Slackers recorded it in 2018. And if I'm not mistaken, the 2018 version is the same lyrics.
Yeah.
But musically, it sounds a lot like the version on the new album, but it's lyrically the same as from 1998.
Yeah. We were trying to come up with some ideas. I mean, always the Slackers are always trying to come up with clever ideas for material, and I can't remember what the situation was, but I just thought, hey, you know, like, why don't we finally do this? Like, we got a moment. Like, let's actually do this, and you know, I think we're allowed to play this song. I mean, I don't think anybody would, you know, honestly, I mean, I didn't go through any specific channels, but I mean, I don't think anybody would argue with me that I wrote the tune, you know? We played it. We sent it to Hellcat. They loved it. They were cool. And it was fun. It was like whatever. But when we started hanging around during the quarantine and recording, that's when the light bulb went off. And I was like, oh man, like, hold on a second. Like, we could have a victorious kind of song here. Like, while they took down that Confederate flag at the Statehouse.
Yeah.
You know, and actually have like a moment of affirmation, you know, instead of always just complaining at everything, right? Which is also in the song. It's a lot of complaining, but it's a good affirmation. It's like, hey, that happened. And now we can talk about real facts and real history. And it was great for me too, because I had to make sure I got my facts straight. I wasn't going to sing a song and all of a sudden somebody's going to pull the rug out from under me and say, oh, well, you know, that's not exactly the truth. I really did have to go read a lot. And in the midst of reading, I got all this new perspective on it too. And it really, you know, changed the whole thing for me, you know.
What was some of the new perspective you got as you worked on the final version of the song?
Well, the thing that I didn't realize was that the year that it went up was 1961. And that 61 was like a pivotal year for civil rights. That this was the year when it went from being a black movement to being a full society movement. I listened to this really interesting online, I think it was like an NPR article. It might have been an interview with people, but it was all these people that they started reading about the civil rights movement. And they were like, oh, I can do something. Like, you know, they were people from all over the country that were hearing about it. And they were like, they had this calling to be like, oh, I need to show up. Like, this is something that's happening right now in my world. And I, as a white person or as a person that's not from that state or whatever the case is, I need to show up and be there. And that's when the whole Freedom Riders thing started, where people started riding the bus as a protest. To say that they would ride the bus in the wrong spot, or that they would ride the bus on certain routes where, you know, people would be, you know, doing everything from sitting in the front of the bus to like stopping at lunch counters in bus stations and sitting in the wrong section, you know. And these people were showing up. One of the guys that was interviewed was a guy that was in seminary. He was like going to be some kind of Methodist minister. There was a couple of college students. There was a nurse. And these were people that just showed up, and, you know, some of them got killed, actually. Like they were talking about the people that they showed up with, and some of them didn't make it. You know, Martin Luther King was telling them, don't go on this trip. Like, you're going to die. Like, you're not going to make it out of Mississippi. And it happened, you know? So like, when I read this stuff, I was like, oh my God, this was like really, really heavy, you know? And the fact that we had a relic from this really crucial moment in history that was actually, you know, I could sing about, you know, and tell a story that was really, you know, it was current, you know, and it is current right now, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. The people that oppose the protest of this stuff, they always say stuff like, well, why do these people have to resort to violence? Why not peaceful protest and blah, 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 like Martin Luther King? But it's like, peaceful protest in the 60s meant specifically agitating racists and people that hate you with the knowledge that they're very likely to be violent to you and to take it. So this idea that peaceful protest is like this, like,
oh yeah,
literally peaceful thing. It's not peaceful. You are like inciting people with hatred to come after you. And that's why it was effective, because it showed how hateful these people were.
Yeah. The Freedom Riders stuff. I mean, you could write. I mean, there are books and stuff on it. It's intense. I mean, I think what happened is that at that time there was a discrepancy between federal and state law or something, or there was a sea change happening, but it wasn't happening on the level of local laws.
Yeah.
And so people were challenging this stuff, and they're like, "Hey, the world is changing." It's kind of like all the things that are happening with with the gender stuff and with the stuff that happened with the gay movement. Like it's gonna change, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's changing. Culture is changing, and everybody can complain, and they can say what they want and say, "Oh, we should pass laws," but there's kids being born right now that are never going to know the world in the way that those old guys saw it. They're just seeing the world as it is now. I have little nieces and stuff like that. They're just growing up with much more open minds than we grew up with.
Oh, yeah.
The world is different. They don't even see gender the way we saw it. They don't even see sexuality the way we saw it. They don't see race the way we saw it. Nobody. They don't see culture, ethnic differences. They don't see, so many things. And it's funny because I talk to my my younger friends, and I see how it changes in in gradation, like as the years go by.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed about the Slackers is that y'all seem to be a little bit more tapped into being forward thinking than some of the other band members the same age as y'all. Why do you think that is? Why are the Slackers kind of the ones that are more open to change?
I don't know. I mean, if you ask me, and I mean, I may have rose-colored glasses on, but I kind of feel like we live in a kind of a charmed world. The Slackers and the scene that I live in.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally pretty open-minded, pretty progressive. Ska and reggae, I mean, is a beautiful scene because right there in the foundation is an anti-racist and multicultural stance, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that attracted me to it in the first place, right? It was cool because it had all these things built into it. I think we're just more vocal about it. I think we are lucky, we got guys like me and Dave that right out of the gate were willing to, we showed each other our songs. I was talking about showing people your songs. Dave and I showed each other our songs. We were like, "Oh, hey, wow, you're talking about the same things. Like, wow, this is cool." Like,
Nice.
Hey, you write a song like that. Cool. And like, I also remember asking the band a few times when it comes to stuff that might be a little dodgy. I'll ask them, "Hey, is it okay to sing a song about this? Like, is it okay? Are you guys cool with me calling somebody out or saying something that's whatever?" And I would say 90% of the time, 99%, massive majority of the time, they're always totally like, "Oh yeah, of course. How could we not say that? That's cool."
That's rad.
I was reading on a Reddit post about Statehouse that some of the fans in the South were saying, like, over the last couple of years, when you guys have toured through and played that song, that you were not at all like trying to, tiptoe around it. You'd be really upfront and blunt about the content of the lyric, and you're in you're in Confederate country. You're not.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, what has that been like?
Well, I think we learned over the years. I mean, because there always is going to be people in the crowd that disagree. I mean, I remember one time early on in the Trump years, saying something that seemed completely like obvious and that no one in the world could possibly disagree with, somewhere like Las Vegas or somewhere. And people told me, "Oh, you should have seen the guys that stormed out of the back. They just left. Oh, forget it. We're out of here." And I don't know if they were just in the casino and happened to wander in, or if they were Slackers fans that, somehow missed the fact that we take a stance on some things that are kind of, progressive or whatever. Maybe thought, for whatever reason. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, okay, that's going to happen. And we're definitely going to talk to people that don't know where they stand. And it's a matter of not preaching at people, but it's a matter of stating facts and opening up a conversation. I think that's what I always appreciated from my punk bands was, here's the facts, like the Dead Kennedys or something, here's the facts, here's a situation, go. What do you got to say,
I want to go from your early days, like go into Slackers. Before Slackers, you were in a band called Sick and Mad.
Yeah, still Sick and Mad exists.
Still, I know the band continued, but it predates the Slackers. It's a punk rock band.
Yeah.
And the band, I think, but the formation of Slackers kind of comes through Sick and Mad, right? Because you and Marcus were in this band.
Yeah, me and Marcus met in this band.
So what happens? How does Slackers happen?
The funny thing was, I was in a couple of bands at that time that loved to practice and didn't like to play gigs.
They got it backwards.
I know that there are bands that are like this. It's all about the practice. And I agree. I mean, practice is fun, and especially back then, you get to know your instrument, you get to know how to play with people. But I knew that I wanted to take it out and see what, the world thought of it, and it wasn't like we were going to play big shows. We were literally going to play these little showcase gigs to 15 people in, some bar that has 20 bands on in a night. It's nothing fancy. But Marcus was into it, and the drummer from the other band that was called the Rabies, he was into it. And both of those bands were kind of like semi-disintegrating at the time. Particularly the Rabies was really falling apart. And so I just took Marcus and this and the old drummer Luis, and I said, "Hey, let's just take the gigs that the other band is gonna miss. We'll just pick up those gigs and we'll figure out a band and we'll just go play." And that was really it. It was just all about playing live. Like, we didn't even have much of a repertoire. We just played a lot of covers and a few songs that I had written that were really easy.
Was this the first ska band that you were a part of?
Well, the Rabies was actually a kind of they were like practically a third wave, if you were going to say third wave at the time. I don't think it even existed. But they were coming out of the New York kind of revved up fast reggae tradition that had kind of happened in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It was ska, but it was just super speedy reggae and dubby stuff. And that was the band I was in, called the Rabies. We didn't really do much at all. I think we put out a couple of demo tapes. And yeah, like I said, those guys never wanted to play shows, so yeah, that was my entree.
You specifically wanted to start a ska band then? Or were you just kind of open to whatever?
I wanted to play. I honestly, I wanted to play bass in a blues band. Probably, I thought it was the easiest way to get on stage, because it seemed like there was a lot of blues guitar players and not a lot of blues bass players.
Just plug yourself into that hole.
Yeah, I was like, I can do this. I'm good at this, And of course, meeting Marcus, it was like, okay, well, now I got a bass player. And Marcus always tells this story about how I showed up at his living room, and we were hanging out, and I said, "Hey, Marcus, what do you think about playing ska and reggae? Like, what do you think? Like, you want to be in a ska band?" And it was maybe a similar idea as the blues bass thing. There was a hole, and I thought, not that many bands are doing this. There's only a few bands, and all the bands from the 80s that I knew had kind of quit. They had turned into funk bands and, progressive rock or, new R&B or something. And everybody had kind of given up on it. And it was like us coming into a world that was, the only two bands there was the Scofflaws, and I think Mephistopheles had just started about the time we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was really the Scofflaws. That was it.
Do you remember the first Slackers show?
Actually, I was just walking through Manhattan recently, and I walked by the original venue that I think we played our very first show as what would be the Slackers. I don't know what we called ourselves that night.
What was that venue called? Do you remember?
It was at the time it was called the Space at Chase, and it had a gangster on the front logo, and it had like a guy with a Tommy gun,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it suited us very well. I was like, God, this is good. This kind of suits our aesthetic, And they used to have a lot of ska nights there. Actually, they would have DJs and bands from out of town would come play because Boston had a few bands. I think Philly had a band. There was the remnants of a ska scene kicking around.
Yeah.
And I think we opened for somebody that night. It might have been the hi-hats from Philly or DC or something like that,
What's that space now?
Well, when I walked by recently, it looked like it had still been a bar, but now it was closed. So, and it didn't look like it had been closed for a long time. It looked like maybe it was a COVID casualty.
Oh.
I think it had remained a bar and kind of a cheesy bar for a long time.
Didn't have the Tommy gun guy on the front anymore?
No. Space at Chase had gone long gone since then.
Gotcha.
When we had Dunya Best on the podcast, she talked about meeting you guys when in your early days, and she kind of described you as being kind of beatniks and hippies, and that I can't remember who, maybe Marcus or Luis had congas and everything. Is this an accurate picture of early slackers?
Yeah, it was definitely a ragtag bunch. I mean, Marcus had a big long ponytail, and he would often don some floppy kind of hippie looking hat. Yeah, we were ragtag. I mean, I was trying to be a kind of ska aesthetic, I guess, from what I had seen around. But I was probably looking a lot more like Huckleberry Finn than I was looking like a skinhead, Yeah, Dunia was at those shows. She played at the Space Chase with us. We have footage somewhere. Mm-hmm. Recently, it came up. I think that may have been why it was on my mind.
How many shows did she play with you guys?
It was a few months. I mean, we were pretty busy back then. So we were playing 3 and 4 shows a week, probably, if we could, And that was just in the New York area, just different bars around New York. Yeah, she probably played, for a few months with us,
Mm-hmm.
And it was really early. Yeah, it was a primordial stew of what would become the Slackers. I mean, we would have rappers come up and rap with us. We would have a whole section of hippie drummers that would show up every once in a while and just start playing chaotic drums with us. I mean, it was insane. I mean, we were like definitely of the time in New York in the early 90s. We fit right in,
Yeah, I've listened to some early recordings, like demos. And it's interesting because musically, not really recognizable to the slackers we know today, but your voice is like virtually the exact same. Like, I mean, aside from the fact that you're a better singer now, it's interesting. Like, people's voices change over time. The sound of your voice sounds the same when you were just a teenager or your early 20s or however young you were.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
But, and you sound old too. That's, I think, the part that kind of cracks me up listening to these demos. Like, I don't picture a young guy singing.
That's funny. That's actually funny to hear.
Did you think about singing as a craft or have like influences, or was it just something that you did like this is just how I sing and I just sing?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I never wanted to be the singer in the band. I mean, that's like, you may have heard me say that in other places, but we were looking for singers, and I was happy to be a songwriter, and I was very happy to be a rhythm section player, and as I always am. We just could never find anybody that really could sing the tunes and get the melodies right, or they would have a great look, but they wouldn't quite sing in tune, or they couldn't keep their note with harmony. They would slide into all the other harmony notes.
Mm.
And so it was like after a while, I ended up singing a lot of the songs. It really happened by accident. There was even our old guitar player TJ used to sing, like we would kind of sing all together some songs. And you can hear on the early recordings, his voice is big in the mix sometimes, you know. And yeah, it's funny. It was really totally accidental, and I'm actually shocked to hear that my voice sounds the same.
I think like one of the things I've always liked about the Slackers is that, say your voice reminds me of someone like Van Morrison or Mick Jagger. It's not the kind of voice you typically hear in ska, but you hear it in like rock and roll and you hear it in like soul music more. So it's kind of like there's like a tattered sort of quality to it. And it's a cool aspect to Slackers that really sets you apart from other bands in the genre.
To me, it always makes you guys seem punk, even though you're not punk at all.
Yeah, well, I almost said it before with the other part of the conversation. You know, I mean, the Slackers' attitude is the attitude of a punk band.
Totally.
You know, we act like a punk band, even though we don't play, you know, in quotes, the punk music. We're playing. I mean, you know, the band is basically a punk attitude. You know.
Yeah.
But that's nice. Thanks for the Van Morrison and the.
Oh sure, yeah. Happy to.
I'd rather sing like those guys. I mean, they're perfect in their imperfection. You know those.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's something about being not exactly perfect that makes art great.
Yeah, particularly Mick. He's very imperfect, but he's so great.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I think one of the things I had a really high voice for a lot longer than a lot of my friends. Like people's voices started changing, and I remember I had this kind of choir boy voice for a lot longer than a lot of folks. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm not even going to sing harmony in a band. I'm not even going to sing backups until my voice really gets kind of throaty and crusty. And I really did wait quite a while before I opened my mouth. So, I mean, that being said, you know, I don't know if you can imagine before my voice dropped, you know.
For sure.
The band, there's a good period of time when the Slacker starts before you release your first record, which was Better Late Than Never.
Yeah, appropriately.
96 on Moon Records. I know that there's like development happening. There's members. You're kind of solidifying the band. What is this period like for you guys?
Well, yeah, those early days, like I'm saying, we tried everything. You know, we didn't have the horn section for a long time. Dave and Mush, our old trumpet player, they kind of showed up about 2 or 3 years in. We were definitely coming from the two-tone influence,
Yeah,
and rock and roll and punk that was happening, and rock and roll and punk that was happening in New York. We were playing around with a lot of things. You know, we had such a weird variety of songs. It was one of those bands that, you know, you could never tell what the next song was going to be, you know, like next song might be a country song. And then the next one would be like, sound like Dead Kennedys. And then the next one would be like, you know, the Cramps or something, or a Ramones cover. But the thing that we'd always come back to is that we liked the ska beat, and we were discovering it together, all together as a group, you know. And different guys would discover some detail about it, and they'd say, "Oh, did you ever notice that the bass always does this?" Or like, "Hey, did you notice that the drums, they really just hang out here, and then this is actually what they do?" You know, because nobody had figured out yet in the greater, you know, zeitgeist, the greater collective unconscious, you know, of music. Nobody had figured out how to play it right yet. You know, we just had heard tidbits of it, and didn't actually know that the drums are supposed to do this, the bass is supposed to do this, the guitar does this. You know, it was like rumors you'd hear. You know, somebody would tell us, "Oh, hey, we heard that the guitar, don't play an upstroke, play a downstroke. Like that's where you get the real sound." You know, or you know, the things about the organ bubble. Like it would be like, no, it's choppier than you think. Like it sounds like it's mushy, but it's actually really choppy. Like listen close. And so we'd all sit there and like crowd around these like, our little box radios with their crappy speakers and try to decipher what the hell was going on in these songs,
Yeah, that's interesting. I've talked to bands that come from like that, so late '80s to '90s, wanting to play the traditional or play like Jamaican influenced ska, and I hear that a lot. Like you don't really know, you can't listen to Ska original records and really make it out. But when the band reforms and starts playing live and starts recording new studio records, totally different story.
Yeah.
Now you can actually hear what they're doing.
Yeah, right. It's not the mush of everything onto the one microphone in the room,
Was it like that for you? I mean, was there anything totally significant, like Scotalites, reforming or anything like that really was like a light bulb to understanding ska?
Well, I mean, we were lucky that we had them in our city. So
Yeah.
you could see the Scatolites. I would see them sometimes twice a month. I'd see them week after week sometimes. They had a residency at one point. Did they have a residency? They were playing at this TGI Fridays on like Fifth Avenue. I can't remember what the place was called. But like it was a tiny little bar room and you could stand next to whoever you wanted. I remember one time I stood behind Lloyd Knibb and watched him all night and just studied his drumming. Other times I would stand, by the guitar and the keyboards and be like, what are these guys doing? And of course, that style is only one aspect of what we wanted to do in a very 90s, in a very 90s sensibility. We wanted our music to be described by a long list of genres. We wanted to be like, oh yeah, it's funk, new wave, punk, disco, goth. This, it's like the more names you could have, the more genres you could have in the list of your description, the cooler you were.
It's so funny. Like in theory, I mean, in theory, I get it. Like, if you're good at if you can play more than one genre, obviously that's that much better. But in reality, you have to be amazing. You have to be like Fishbone, or you have to be a band that's actually able to play all those genres in order for it to actually be worth doing.
Yeah. And even a band like Fishbone, it kicks them in the ass. It bites them in the ass, right?
Oh, it's not necessarily good for their career, but in terms of like just appreciating a band, where it's like, okay, well that band can actually do these different styles. I'm sure they would be much bigger if they honed in their sound and were able to be like, this is who we are, and it's very simple and stuff. But that's just not who they are.
Well, one of the classic bands for that that were comrades of ours, brothers in arms, was Skinnerbox. And that was the old Pre-Stub and All Stars. That was the Jeff Baker band, and Skinnerbox had the ability to do that. I mean, you would see them from one night to the next, and they might play an all funk set. I remember one time when I saw them, they had filled in because somebody couldn't make it, and they did an opening slot for the Scatolites, and they played an all trad ska set. And it blew my mind. I was like, wow. I was like, I am going to see this band everywhere. And I went to see them later that week somewhere like Continental Divide. And yeah, all they played was funk. And then at some point, Rocka T jumped up and did like a dance hall set with them. And I was what the hell? Where's the trad ska? I wanted to see you guys do the thing you did the other night. And they're like, oh, what are you talking about? We did that because we're open for the Scatolites, man, And it was bands like that, because there was a few of them around. But it was bands like that that made me decide in the Slackers that we were going to have to hone our focus, and we were not going to be one of these bands that would be successful playing every style of music. We should pick a couple, get real good at them, and people would know what they were coming to see. And if we wanted to have a punk band, well, we'll do that and have another band. If we want to play a different sort of music, we'll have that band. But the Slackers, we should decide what it looks like, what it sounds like. And at a certain point, the band, I don't think it was a popular consensus in the band. I think I really pushed it, and maybe one of the other guys. And we were like, yeah, it's smarter That way people know what they're going to get. And, obviously we're not going to play the same stuff every night anyway. Even if we could, we couldn't at that point. It was a mishmash of insanity. Yeah, it was helpful to think of it like, yeah, let's play kind of trad. Let's go for a 60s sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 96, you have Better Late Than Never on Moon. Where do you feel like the band stands at this point? I mean, ska's kind of getting more and more popular, both in New York and both nationally. Do you feel like you're doing well in that scene, or are you kind of a lesser known band at this point?
Yeah, we were always outsiders. We never we never really we were never the popular kids. And so like we'd show up, we would do opening slots. We had a lot of bar shows and a lot of little community center shows and oddball gigs that we would get. And we had kind of gotten our own crowd in the New York scene that wasn't really you wouldn't call them a ska crowd particularly. They were just Slackers fans. They were just weirdos from all different, I don't know. They were just people that would find us and they're like, yeah, cool. I'm going to come check this band. Yeah, I think we only started getting a kind of a ska scene reaction when we left New York. We started to really, when we went to Florida, we'd go to Florida a lot, Atlanta, Georgia, places where there was like an active ska scene happening in the 90s, and bands like the Pie Tasters and, Bim Scala Bim had toured, and, there was a lot of touring bands out there, the Toasters, there was everybody, New York Citizens had been places, and people knew about this New York ska scene, or this kind of ska scene that was happening. And then we started to register on that. People started to say, oh yeah, I like the Slackers. In some ways that helped our New York. I mean, in many ways it helped our New York status because we'd come back to New York and people would say, hey, I heard that you had a good show in Miami. My
Yeah.
friend said, my cousin said that you played great in Miami. Like, what the hell? Like, same band,
So we were talking about Rancid, and I want to get more into that because your next record, Red Light, is on Hellcat, which is Tim Armstrong's subsidiary label on Epitaph. But there's kind of a whole story about you guys getting on that label. Now here's how I understand it. You can kind of chime in if I'm a little off base, but
Yeah.
Jeff Baker starts developing a relationship with Tim. He's doing some stuff with him, and then Tim learns about Stubborn All Stars. You're playing with Stubborn All Stars, and Tim says like, "Hey, Stubborn All Stars should open for Rancid in Europe."
Yeah.
That's kind of the beginning for you, right?
That's the beginning. I mean, it was fun. It was so funny because we were all recording together, Stubborn and Slackers and a bunch of different bands. We'd all hang out at this studio called Coyote, and literally they got a call, Coyote, and they asked, "Does anybody know a punk trombone player? We're looking for a trombone player for a punk band." Yeah, exactly. And that was the reaction. It was like, we don't know anybody. And then the guy at the studio went, oh no, there's that guy that comes in here with the Stubborn All Stars guy, Jeff Baker, and he plays with Murphy's Law. I mean, that's a punk trombone player. And they gave Rancid his number, and Jeff played this gig. I think they played at it was like one of the really big venues in New York. It's an old dance hall from the 40s. God, I can't remember it. What I'm thinking of now, but it's the song, where he sings "Standing on the Corner of 52nd and Broadway." It's basically that place, 52nd and Broadway. And I remember I went with Jeff that night because I was curious about this Rancid band. I heard they had a ska song. I heard they had a two-tone song, and I went in and I stood at the back and I watched Jeff run up on stage and play with them, and he slipped them a Stubborn All Stars record.
That's what you do.
And that was it. Yeah. Next thing you know, we get a call. Come on tour. We need an opening band, and you guys sound great. We want you guys come with us. And then, Schmoozerama began. I said, hey, I listened to your record, guys. I heard you had an organ on the record, but I don't see an organ player on tour with you. Guess what I do?
How was the tour? Was it a good tour? How did Stubborn do?
We did okay. We weren't exactly what everybody was looking for, and I'd say night to night it was different. You got to remember, we toured Europe and England with them in like 95, something like that, 95, 96, something right around then.
Yeah.
96, I think. Ska and reggae, people know about that stuff in England and Europe. So people have their opinions, you know. Some places we'd go, man, people would go crazy. They'd be like, we never heard a band like you for years. You know, the bouncers would go nuts for us. They'd be like, "Oh, mate, you sound just like the bands I grew up with," you know. And and other places, the punks would spit on us the whole night and throw beer cans at us. And I remember one time we played in a gig in Wolverhampton, right, which is like a big soccer town. And I mean, literally, people were buying pitchers of beer just to throw them at us. It was unreal. It was unfucking believable. I came off that show. I was drenched in beer and spit. And I was like, I never felt so disgusting. Like my suit, oh my God, it was a wreck. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that was those were the tours we learned how to really live, you know, like on tour. It was like, okay, now you jump in the shower with your suit on. That's it. You know, lather it up, you know?
Hand me the soap.
Ugh.
So not long after that tour, Tim invites you, Jeff, David. I'm not sure if anyone else to go on Lollapalooza.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think Elwood from
Okay.
Stubborn, and maybe Danny Doolin too, the trumpet player, because I think they had some gigs they really wanted a big horn section. They were going for this thing on a couple tunes, which, you know.
So do you remember what songs you guys came up for?
Oh, they played about 4 or 5 ska tunes in the set. I think they were doing, you know, they were out doing the obvious, right? Time Bomb. There's a song called Daly City Train, which I really liked.
I Want to Riot.
I Want to Riot. We were in on writing that one, and the funny thing is Tim and the bunch they all got approached for the tune. Basically, Beavis and Butthead said, "We love you guys. We want to have you guys in the movie. Come up with a tune, and we'll see if we can find a spot in the movie for a tune." And we happened to all be there, and so of course Dave and I went back to our hotel room and said, "We have to be the ones that write the tune." So
yeah,
we just start coming up with things like, okay, let's watch all this Beavis and Butthead. Let's think, what do they want to, you know, what do you think? Bebop? Yeah, maybe this thing. Oh, we'll do this. We'll do that. Minor key ska. Okay, this, whatever. And I remember it was one of those things we showed our tunes, and, you know, I think we were off by a million miles, you know, because the I Want a Riot tune was exactly what, you know, it kind of fit the mood, you know.
So I think it was David Hilliard was telling me that the Wu-Tang Clan were supposed to be on that track too, but they just didn't do it. And so which ended up like working out for you guys because there was just all this money that was going to go to the Wu-Tang that went to everyone else.
Oh, is that the reason? Yeah, because I remember it was a really good paying gig. That was one of those things where Rancid really came through for us, you know.
You guys got Wu-Tang money.
Yeah. Well, I remember Wu-Tang was on that tour. This was a funny, you know, the entree to my music life is these big tours, you know, like I'm hanging out, I'm taking a bus with Metallica, I'm you know, eating lunch with Soundgarden, you know, like it was a really like jarring change of culture for me, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I was all thumbs. I was putting my foot in my mouth all over the place.
How so? What do you remember?
Oh my God. I mean, I would just say stupid shit to everybody. I mean, I was like, you know, I'm just a cocky kid from New York that, like, when I get nervous, I start to be kind of like moderately insulting, you know? And, you know, just because that's, you know, in a way, it's kind of how we make, you know, dare I say, it's how my friends make friends in New York, is to be a kind of a shit to each other and see who can take it. And you find out who wants to hang out, you know? It's not meant to be mean spirited, but
no.
Yeah, I remember one time I was hanging out with Wu-Tang. I was nervous around them because they were obviously big shots. Something was going on, and they had this kind of air around them, right? my sister had asked me to get their autographs. Now, I didn't know what the hell they sounded like, and I had given up on hip hop for years by then. I think the last thing I had listened to was maybe Cypress Hill. And honestly, when You're Down with OPP happened, I was like, yeah, hip hop is dead. That's it. It's over, you know? So I walked into their dressing room and I asked Jeff Baker's old girlfriend, I can't remember her name off the bat. She walked in with me and I asked her to be kind of my like wingman for the situation. I said, could you say that you're my sister? And, just say, this is my name and can you sign this poster for me? And you'll do me a big favor. I was like, because I'm just really nervous and I don't know how to ask people for an autograph for my sister. I feel like a schmuck, And so she walks in and she says, oh, hey, Wu-Tang, and they all turn around. It's this cute little girl. And she says, this is my friend Victor, and he's really nervous to ask you guys for autographs. So you think like you guys could do him a favor? And I was just like, put me in the hot seat, And then, so of course I started goofing around, and I was like, hey, Wu-Tang, I never heard of you guys. Like, where you from? Like, what's the deal? This and that, And I think I was like, so where you from? I'm like, you don't sound like you're from California, but like, I'm not from New York and I never heard of you. So like, where you from? And because I said, I know you're not from Uptown. And they were like, oh, we're from Staten Island. And I remember saying like, Staten Island? What the hell are you talking about? That's not New York. That's New Jersey. You guys should just say from New Jersey. And it just started there and it ended at some spot where they were like, I think the last guy was signing my thing. And they were just like, all right, get the hell out of here before we fucking smack you. Like, just shut up, I was like, what are these? I mean, what's your real name? Is your name Bob? Is it Frank? Henry? I mean, I got Killer Bee guy. I got Dirty guy. I got Method guy. I'm like, oh, yo, come on. My name's Vic. What's your name? Fred? Your name Frank? Joey? I mean, I was a real schmuck.
So did you get all the autographs though for your sister?
Oh, I got a lot of them. I think actually one of the guys wasn't there, and one of the guys was getting really big. Whoever it was at that time, whether it was, I don't know, Method Man or Red Man or one of those guys, they were the guys that he was getting all the spotlight, and he was the one that was supposed to sing with Tim on the recording.
Oh, okay.
And I think there was whatever was going on. There was some political money shit or whatever. And I think that's why he wasn't around, actually. They were having some heavy meeting or something, It was funny. It was funny times. I got to meet so many cool people. I got to meet Lee Perry on that, one of those tours. Lee Perry wrote my name down in his little book. I felt like somebody was writing my name in the book of life. It's like Perry's, yeah. Scratch he goes, hey man, give me your number. If I need a hog and player, I call you. All right. And he writes New York on top of it, and he writes Vic and my number. I was like, this is the best. I can't believe this, Lee Perry's got my number.
Aaron, do you remember at the Slacker show when you went back up to Vic to ask about doing this right now? And gave him your number, but your number was already in his phone?
Yeah. And it said Aaron Ska Writer.
That's right.
I felt just the same way you felt about Lee Perry. I'm like, oh,
there you go, Aaron Ska Writer.
It's in the cell phone of life.
That's right. Oh, it's embarrassing sometimes when I'm supposed to have called somebody, or I say, oh, I would have texted you. I don't have your number, and then they give me the first like 5 digits, and their name pops right up
in there.
And I'm like, oh, that's you. Oh shit,
Easy to do. Meet a lot of people.
Yeah, it's true. I'm a bit of a space cadet. So,
on the Lollapalooza tour, as I understand it, Tim was talking about the fact that, I got this label Hellcat. I'm
yeah.
And you guys were just you and Dave were just like hitting him hard, campaigning for the Slackers to be on this new label.
Oh yeah.
Is that what happened?
Well, you got to understand. I mean, we were coming from absolutely, nothing, zero.
Yeah.
Like, the reason why it took 5 years to make that first record with Moon was because, I mean, there was just no money. There was just no opportunity.
Yeah.
And studios were as such back then. You had to pay a lot of money to go to a studio. It wasn't like now you record a demo on your computer or your cell phone, for Christ's sakes, you know? Yeah, it took money, you know, and to press records and CDs, all this took a lot of money. And so whenever we saw an opportunity, yeah, we would work it hard, you know? And I think Tim and Laws and those guys, Matt Freeman is a kindred spirit, you know. Matt Freeman is very kindred spirit. He knows about hustling, you know, and I think he would laugh at us, but at the same time, he's like, "Yeah, man, that's exactly what you got to do." He's like, "I do exactly the same thing." He's like, "I feel you 100%." And so, yeah, they were very sweet to us and very patient. And I mean, they're not that much older than us, you know. They're just, you know, they're a few years older than us. So they totally get it, you know.
So your girlfriend at the time, the Wicks,
Mm-hmm.
you got her to be on the tour at some point? What's the story there?
Everybody's girlfriends were coming to visit at different times. And I remember, you know, I mean, I was out for like months, 2 months with them, 3 months. It was some long tours. And I remember asking, you know, if it was possible. I said, you know, I don't expect to have the same treatment as everybody, but, you know, hey, would it be possible? My girlfriend is along the route. She happens to be here. You think she can hop on the bus for a little bit? And they said, yeah, sure. Why not? They said, you know, you're cool, you're mellow. And at the time, I think there was even the slackers do it now. There's a kind of a rule, you know, you can't have somebody visit for more than, you know, 4 days or something, because otherwise it kind of ruins the vibe, you know, gets in the way. People start getting pissed off, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it does make sense. It's practical. And I think with these guys, maybe it was a week. And I remember she endeared herself so much to the band, and particularly the bus driver, because I think she was cleaning the bus or something, that when it came time for her to leave, and I was ready for it to be the end of the visit, the bus driver actually said, I would like to invite her as a guest, as my guest for the next week, because she's been such a good guest. And if it's okay with everybody, you know, and everybody was like, yeah. And I was like, wow, okay, that's really cool. Like, I'm really happy everybody gets along with her so well. This is fantastic. And somewhere in that next week, yeah, you know, big checks had been coming in for Rancid. They were having a hit record at the time, right? That Out Come the Wolves was a hit record. They were making big money on tours. They had advances from licensing and all this crazy stuff. So Brett Gurwitz would show up once in a while, and he shows up and he says, hey, I got this great idea for an imprint. You know, you're a visionary, you're a personality, da-da-da. He says, Tim, here you go. What do you think? Next thing I know, they're having a meeting with my girlfriend. And she comes back and she says, I don't know what the hell happened, but, you know, for some reason they think that I'm like, that I can run a record company. I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Did she have any background in any sort of work like this before that?
She's one of these people that I don't know what it is about her, but she's one of those people that goes to work as a, whatever, opening the mail, and they suddenly want to make her manager.
Amazing.
You know, she worked at a video store and she was like there, like cleaning up the video store. Next thing you know, she's managing 3 video stores.
She did work at Moon a little bit, though, didn't she? Before then?
Yeah, she had experience there. She had toured with bands. I think she had toured with the Toasters. She had toured with the Scatolites. She had done a bunch of stuff. She was in a fold of that scene, you know.
So it wasn't completely out of the blue.
No, it wasn't completely out of the blue. I mean, she had instinct. She knew a lot of people. She's a charmer, no doubt, you know, and especially back then she was, you know, we were all, you know, our eyes were wide open, and, you know, charm was on, you know, 100%. But it was funny. I was just like, wow, what do you think? Like, that's crazy. And I understood that from a business perspective, it was also a good idea to hire somebody that wasn't Tim himself to be the president and manager and everything. You know, he was the king, and now you needed people to do management, you know? So it made sense. Okay, cool. She seems capable. She seems like everybody likes her. And as I said, she had managed to charm everybody that she came in touch with on the tour. So I suppose if you're starting a record company, you need one of those, you know? I mean, that's what I would say, right? Yeah.
So Hellcat gets going. She's got this job. At what point do you get word that, okay, Slackers is going to be part of this? Is it immediately, or is there like an uncomfortable pause of period of time where you don't really know?
There was definitely an uncomfortable period. I mean, we had played our stuff for the band, and we had played our stuff for Tim and Brett. I mean, I was shopping stuff to Brett all the time. You know, I was like, "Hey, Sick and Mad." I was like, "Hey, look at this country tune I wrote. Hey, look at this. Hey, I plays blues piano." Um, Nothing was really catching with them, you know. And I think what happened is they started to put together that "Give 'Em the Boot," the first "Give 'Em the Boot" compilation.
Oh yeah.
It was a genius idea, and you got to give Brett, you got to give the devil his due. He came up with this great concept. We're going to do a compilation. It's not going to be just bands that are going to be on the label. It's just going to be a great comp. It's not going to be specific to a genre. It's just going to be everything. You know, it could be anything and everything, and we're going to sell it for $5. And that was it. It was a very general kind of, you know, here you go, boom, throw it against the wall, see what happens. And between the Wicks was the one that actually oversaw putting that together. She basically put that whole record together. And guys would bring bands in. Laws had found bands like the Dropkick Murphys. Tim had a couple of bands that he knew. People were sending stuff in all the time. They were listening to cassettes and CDs. And she knew that some things were going to be on there. She's like, well, Scatolites are going to have a track, no doubt. She goes, she had been on tour with the Pie Tasters. She was like, Pie Tasters, I think they got tunes. I think they should have a track. Hellcat, you know, they're the face and the sound of the new generation of the ska movement, right? Like that we were part of. And then, of course, there was LA bands like Union 13 was going to be on, or that crazy punk band with Dwayne Peters.
US Bombs.
My God, what a great band, you know? So, like, they were going to be on. I mean, it just made perfect sense, you know? And then somewhere along the line, she's like, I'm putting the Slackers on, you know? And I think there might have been a moment, there might have been like a showdown moment where, like, you know, they said something like, the Slackers, you know? And she was like, look, you put the Slackers on, otherwise I'm out, you know, something like that. And I think she really came to bat for us. I think she was like, you don't understand these guys. I have faith. I believe in these guys. Like, I believe it. And I'm telling you, I see it. And they were like, well, I don't know what you're seeing, but I mean, I guess if you say so. And the rest is history.
Yeah, the song on "Give 'Em the Boot" was "Watch This."
Yeah,
Which a good. That's a good song. I'd say a good introductory Slacker song.
yeah. We were in the studio, like back to the whole thing about that. We did everything ourselves. We had no money. We were recording Red Light before we had a record deal. We just knew that we wanted to make a record.
You knew you weren't going to put that record out on Moon already, right?
We had no idea. We just knew we were ready to make another record, and we thought it's time to make a record. And we had saved up like $5,000 or whatever it was going to cost. And we had got some studio days, and we were going to go in, and we were already putting tunes down. And it was about that time that we got the call that was like, hey, we want a tune from you guys. And it was like, oh shit, they want a tune. They want a tune. Like, what do we got mixed? And we had Watch This and Fried Chicken were both mixed. And I think we sent them both, and Watch This was the one that she picked.
So Red Light to me feels like a big step up from Better Late Than Never. Like, I feel like it really captures I feel like it's a lot more bittersweet and moody. And I think that's kind of where you guys end up going with a lot of your music, especially these Hellcat records.
Yeah.
One song you got on that record, Rude and Reckless.
Yeah.
So here's a fun little side story. So we had Brian Fallon on the program.
Yeah.
So you know Brian Fallon's a fan, right?
Yeah. I was just talking about him tonight with one of the guys from Catbite.
So we had him on. We're like, because he was just going, oh my God, Slacker is the best band. Vic's an amazing songwriter. We're like, what's your favorite Slacker song? He's like, I'm gonna go with Rude and Reckless.
Wow.
Because that song reminds me of my father and my relationship to him.
Interesting.
So first, I want to ask you a little bit about that song, but also, what do you think of Brian Fallon? He might be out there listening. What do you think of him as a songwriter?
Oh, that's cool, man. I gotta say, man, those records that what was that one that was the real breakout, the 59 sound or something?
59 Sound, yeah.
That was the one where it was like, oh, okay, they got something going on.
Yeah.
You know, they're onto something. How can I put it? The bands that I like, I'm not genre specific when it comes to what I like. You know, I just like bands that do something cool, and I like bands that kind of grab a little from column A, a little from column B, you know, and then throw their own personality all over it. And I remember that's what I heard from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That record was getting played by a lot of different friends of mine that didn't all share musical tastes.
Mm.
And I remember that was always the marker for me of what is like a record, you know, like, oh, this is a good record. Like when Nirvana happened, like when that whole thing happened. You know, I heard that record around New York in every different place that I would never have expected it, you know? And it was the same with that 59 Sound record. I kept hearing it and going, what is this? Who is this? Oh, what is this? Oh, it's that band again. Oh, geez, really? You know? And then not to mention, soon after I was living in New Jersey. And so I was practically neighbors with him. You know, we think we lived about 5 blocks apart.
Oh, yeah.
But not that we saw each other much. I think I saw him once or twice, and maybe I think I may have lent him a delay pedal one time because he was, he needed something. And I was like, I happen to be, you know, 5 blocks away, I think. So like, if you want to drop by, or I can ride my bike down the block, you know. He's a sweetheart though. I got to say, I do get tweets and stuff every once in a while. He'll chime in on something and I'm like, hey, look at this.
Rude and Reckless. I'd love to know a little bit about your thought process and when you were writing that lyrically.
Oh, like many songs, these things just kind of erupt out of me. You know, they're. I think I used to work with my father sometimes doing some funny gigs, and I remember my dad was a tough guy, and I remember one time him saying, "Okay, look, we're gonna drive over here and like follow me, all right? But like, just be safe. Like, don't do what I do, but like, you know, but follow me, all right?" And I remember him driving, and I was like, Jesus Christ. I was like, this guy is a maniac. I'm like, you drive like a maniac. Like you have no fear, you know? And I remember thinking like, oh, this is my father. This is the guy. This is who I live with. This is a guy who tells me what it means to be a man. And maybe this is why I have such a problem with all this. You know? Maybe this is why I'm so conflicted about what my masculinity looks like, you know, to when I compare, you know, and you know, he was a well-meaning guy, and I shouldn't say anything too bad about him because I know he tried real hard, and you know, but our conversations always had to do with like, well, this is, you know, what you do when you know you think you're going to get in a fight, or this is how you stand when somebody looks at you like this, or like wear this kind of jacket because it's intimidating. You know, my father was always comb your hair back. It gives you a little height. You know, open your shirt, show some hair on your chest, you know? Yeah. And so I can't, I think after like, yeah, I was hanging out with my dad with this, following him as he was driving like a maniac. And I think I was probably writing the song as I was driving, I was singing it to myself, you know, rude and reckless.
Yeah.
And of course I copped the line from The Clash, right? Because, yeah, you want to be rude and reckless, you know, want to be crude and speckless. But it just seemed to describe him so much, you know?
Yeah. It's a good song. I'll have to agree with Brian Fallon. It's definitely one of the better Slacker songs.
It's funny, you know, when I think about crafting a song, I wouldn't put it amongst the best crafted songs. it's definitely one of those that, like I said, it kind of just erupts out of me. The words just kind of fall out of my mouth. And I think my notepad had a bunch of verses and a bunch of lines that weren't in any specific or particular order. And I think when I did the take, it's one of those takes where I just sang it as we played it. You know, I don't think I went in and did a overdub for it. The words just kind of fall out how they fall. And it was very much, yeah. There's definitely some confused words in there. Every once in a while, I listen back to the song and I think, what am I trying to say exactly? I'm like, oh yeah, that, you know, there's one line where I read about Doris Day misquoted somebody. There's an old saying, "He who hesitates is lost," I think, and it's said by somebody really old school. And Doris Day quoted it and said, "He who hesitates is last."
Mm.
And that was one of those particularly funny lines to me. And I thought, well, yeah, he who hesitates is last. I was like, I like that. That for me, that works for me. And I think that I'm even trying to say it in the song. I said something like good Doris says, da da da, and then I didn't get to that line, but Doris's name, Doris Day, is getting ready to have, like, that line is getting ready to happen, and it just doesn't happen. So it's like I always hear it, and I know nobody knows that. So, you know.
After Red Light, the next record is The Question. So this album comes out in 1998. So this is the same year as the Rancid record we were talking about, the one with Wrongful Suspicion.
Oh yeah, this is Life Won't Wait.
Yes. So this is all, like, you're talking about hanging out with them and songwriting and with them, and you're also working on this record at the same time too. Is it all kind of happening at the same time?
This was a good year for me because creatively, just so far as studio work, and you know, I was getting to see a lot of different angles of things. Like I was getting to hang out in real classic studios, like Rancid had been recording in Sunset Sound, like where the Doors recorded, and like, you know, Stevie Wonder, Prince, like these were big studios, you know. I think I had gone to some other spots too with them in LA, like the old record plant or something really, like some really big shot stuff. And so when we went back to our old familiar Coyote Studios, I had a different perspective on it. I suddenly appreciated things, and I was like, you know, this is a really great studio. I'm like, you know, I've been there to the places that they say are like classic studios. I'm like, this is great. This is better than any place I've been. And I started to realize we could make a record. We could make records that sounded as good as anything we had ever heard, you know, throughout history. And I think these are the moments, these are the things you learn as you go along. You know, when you start off, you think there's some sort of magic dust that gets sprinkled on everything, and that they must go to some special place where everything sounds great, and you know, oh, it's all studio magic and it's all whatever. There must be some trick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the place and you find out, oh, there's no trick. It's you. It's it. This is it. The board, I sat behind the board at Sunset Sound. That's the famous board that Prince copied, and Stevie Wonder went and rebuilt that room to make it look exactly the way it looks in Sunset, so he could have it in his place. I've been there, and I was like, oh, it's just us. We get to do this. We have the tools, and we can make anything sound like we imagine. We too can make a classic record, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the question is when I realized that, and I think the band, some of the guys that had been with me, like Dave, and, you know, we started to get the memo that we had the magic at our fingertips, and we had these engineers that, my God, these guys, Albert and Mike Coyote from Coyote Studios, were world class. You know, we had them, and they were here for us. They were making it possible. And so that's why the question, there's all this double tracking vocals and there's cool instrumentation. There's some like little tricks. We started to take liberties and have fun, and be like, hey, we can really make a record,
What I like about the question, and I feel like this is true for like the Slackers live show, these days, is even though it's like a record you can dance to, I don't feel like it's in any hurry. It's not in any hurry to get to where it's going, which is why I kind of feel like your show's like that too. It's like your shows, there's energy, there's dancing, but it's also not rushed at all.
Yeah, we don't want to be too. We want to keep our cool,
Yeah.
Dave is. I got to give Dave a lot of credit on this stuff. Dave is. He understands the rhythm of things. Like if you listen to a Dave solo, like he's one of the guys in the band that can really take a long solo, many, many choruses, right? And it's not based purely on his musical prowess, because a guy like Glenn, for example, probably has more actual technique and more musicality, in a very classical definition of that, But what Dave has is Dave understands the rhythm of how to grab somebody, of how to draw somebody in to the to your journey,
Yeah.
I remember hearing somebody say it, because I had posed this conundrum to someone who I trusted, and they said, well, they said with Glenn, we all kind of know he's going to make the basket, like you hear him hit that note, he's going to get it, like he's going to knock it out of the park, bam. But like Dave, it's like he's poised before the basket, and you see him with the ball, and he's just here, 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 here. It's like, oh, is he going to make it? Is he going to make it? And he's like, he's there and he's just about to make the shot, and you like, everybody's watching. And Dave somehow knows this, and he gets everybody wrapped up in his story, Yeah, I think Dave and I also spent a lot of time working on song orders for the records. I think we both learned how to write sets, and everybody in the band learned how to write sets for the band. But particularly Dave, and Marcus, they took it to a level of like, oh no, this is how we're gonna present the story to the crowd tonight. This is how we're gonna get there. And yeah, I gotta give credit, where credit is due, because I think of things maybe more like as an opera or something, or like a Broadway show. It's not really gonna be what everybody's ready for. But these guys think about danceability. They think about, oh yeah, get everybody's attention, but then take it down, be cool,
The Wrongful Suspicion, I know you play on that track, right? You sing on it?
Yeah, I sing actually on the Rancid version.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I am actually singing. I might be singing the main vocal in the chorus, actually. The "What can we do?"
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else is on that? Because there's horns on it. Do you know? Remember who played on that song?
I believe Dave is on it. I think an old trombone player friend of ours that was in the Slackers for a blink, this guy Squanch, I think he plays on it. Yeah, that's all I know. There might have been some Boston's horns or something. I don't know. There was a lot of people coming in and out at that time.
Did you get any other like co-writes with Rancid at that time that actually were released?
Oh yeah, well that record is. I got Hooligans was my tune that they just wrote new words to. Life Won't Wait was my tune that, again, they wrote different words to, and we kind of collaborated on some ideas. Yeah, Statehouse, and I think there's another one on there too. What's the one? Oh, the Hooligans is with the Specials. Life Won't Wait is with Buju. And yeah, I don't know. It's 3 or 4 songs on there that I wrote with them. And I had a lot of stuff too that, like, it came out on they put out like a demos, like a little, Rancid kind of bootleg release. That was a bunch of tunes that didn't make the record that I played on. I think, and I'm actually on some of them I might have actually been playing bass on that, which is funny because Matt Freeman being the, like, the famous bass player. It's funny that I end up playing bass on a fucking Rancid demo. It cracks me up, you know?
Yeah.
I heard, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but I heard that there was like a record that you recorded with Tim that was never released that like you had said is some of your best songwriting.
Oh, well, that was super fun. That was the Silences thing. So
Yeah. Well, so tell us the whole story about this.
So around the same time as all this is happening with the give them the boot comp and the demos for the Life Won't Wait and all the blah blah blah, some of the songs that I'm throwing at them, and we're writing together. Tim starts to say, this doesn't really sound like Rancid, but it sounds really good. So like, we'll put this aside. And we'll make a little project out of it. And they pick the song Policeman, right? Brett Gurwitz comes in and he's just nuts about it. He's like, this tune, this is it, man. Wow, how are you not going to put this tune out? You got to put this on the record. And they start working out some arrangements. Laws starts singing harmonies on it. They changed a couple of the words, whatever, and this is, of course, is a song I had written for Sick and Mad at the end of like Sick and Mad doing a lot of stuff. It was like at the cusp of Sick and Mad and the Slackers beginning, right? But it was a song that I was like, yeah, this is perfect for you guys. Like, you're going to like this. That's how the Silences get, it's like this, who are the Silences? I don't know. It's Tim Armstrong. It's me playing bass. I don't even know if I'm credited on playing or anything on it. We went in and recorded more stuff because we had 5 or 6 songs from that session that were like, hey, this is pretty cool. And we're like, cool, we'll make this the Silences or whatever we want to call it. And I would go by Tim's home studio and we would have different sessions. I would invite musicians in. We had a lot of really cool people come in and play. And I don't know what happened. It kind of just somewhere between his ex-wife breaking up with him and different songs we had recorded with her getting kind of like lost, and forgotten purposely because he was like, yeah, fuck that. Yeah, a lot of music just got kind of forgotten. And I feel like it was a bummer because it was a really cool moment musically. There was a lot of cool stuff happening, but I think we had gotten Josh Freese back to play drums on some stuff. I had brought my friend Simon Chartier out to play guitar, he's kind of a guitar genius, all these LA guys, some of the Hellcat guys. There was all this really cool stuff happening. So
have you taken any of those songs and repackaged them as Slacker songs or solo songs?
I don't know. It was such a weird time. It was such a weird time that I can't honestly say I know what happened. And it was just so much going on. I probably didn't actually. I think those songs were so written together with Tim and written in the moment and, play a part here, play a part there. Let's get some horns in. Let's arrange a horn section. I'll put some piano on this. Hey, let's sing harmonies on that. I couldn't even say that I remember anything in particular, like a song that I could. Yeah, I just remember that it was really fucking cool. And it bummed me out that it never got put out, that we never finished working on it.
Yeah.
And I think what was his band that followed after that? I was in that band for like 10 seconds and then it broke up, or I got kicked out, I think. What's the one with Skinhead Rob singing? He kind of raps on it.
Like, I'm blanking on it. It's the one that has the shampoo commercial song. And
exactly, they had the shampoo commercial.
Why can I not think of this?
Yeah, that band, I think they knew that they were going to get airplay with that band, and they knew that my band was, the Silences or whatever was more of a muso kind of artsy, very music driven, very like, but I think the rap punk thing that they were doing, just seemed to be like, it's going to get more attention.
Transplants, that's what it was called.
Transplants, yeah. I was in that band for, like I said, like about 10 seconds. I showed up for a couple of sessions. never really wasn't really feeling it, but it wasn't introduced to me as a band. It was just, we're going to do some sessions and we're
Yeah.
going to make these rhythms. And I was really into that because I was like, man, give me these weird hip hop, strange rhythms and let me play piano and organ on them. Yeah. Synth, I love it. So I was loving that. But when I found out it was going to be like a punk rap band, and then they wanted to bring in this Blink 182 guy on drums, that was the line for me because I was like, yeah, I don't want to play with Blink 182. Like, it's not my, I hate to say that, like, I don't have a lot of shots to call in the whole world, but I get to say who I like to play with or not. And I'm sure he's a good drummer and whatever, but the beats were there already. They were sequenced beats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, whatever it's a band, and I get about having a live band, and it's cool. But I remember being just like, what the hell? Why do we want to play with Blink 182? I'm like, you're so much cooler than that. Like, you don't need to. You know what I mean? But this is how I talk, and it's a
Yeah.
blessing and a curse for me. It gets me in trouble
Sure.
because I say shit that I probably shouldn't say to somebody at the moment. Now a million years in the past, it doesn't matter what I say.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, I could have probably been a bit more tactful about it. But I remember just saying, "What? What do you mean? Why that? I mean, you got Josh Freese you can ask to be in the band. I mean, it's like having a choice between. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is that they were friends. That Blink 182 guy is friends with Tim, or they grew up together or something. And I guess he is a really good drummer too. So maybe I didn't give him his due either, and I was
Sure.
being unfair. But
So somewhere between the question and Wasted Days, I just have a little side tangent here. Slackers play a show in Tuba City at the Crack Shack. Do you remember this show?
Yeah.
who can forget? It was fantastic.
Tell us about the Slackers playing at the Crack Shack in Tuba City.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I don't know where we came from the night before, but I mean, I was so hungover that it was unreal. And it was back before I had my diet together. Before I knew like my food allergies and things. And it was the first time that any of us had ever tasted fry bread, I think, which is,
Mm-hmm.
it's like real classic Navajo, local specialty. I mean, I guess like all the it's a big native dish, right?
Yeah.
Like Native Americans fry bread.
Yeah.
I just remember them treating us like so good and having such a blast and being so like, you talk about having your eyes opened to a new reality. Like, they showed us dinosaur footprints in the desert. I bought like a Kachina doll. I couldn't believe that they all looked so Asian. Like, I just was like, oh my God, like I totally get it now. Like they're like, that whole thing about the Bering Straits, all of a sudden it all made sense to me. I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God. I'm like, if you didn't open your mouth, I would think you were Japanese. Like, like bizarre. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just totally blew me away. And then not to mention, I'd never been on the res more than driving past it on a highway.
Yeah.
So to actually set foot in the res and hang out with kids and have a day was awesome. I mean, they were so nice. And I thought it was so cool that they were being like completely DIY about this. And they had, saved up money and they would get bands, all sorts of different bands to stop through and play this like dilapidated house in the middle of, you know, this weirdo, like kind of desert landscape. I mean, it was just so surreal, you know? Yeah, not too different than any other punk show I'd say that I played anywhere else, except for the fact that, I mean, oh my God, it was like playing a punk show on the moon,
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. And I've stayed friends with, there are people that show up that were from that show that still say hi to me. And I've gone back to the Navajo Nation and I've gone back and driven around Hopi land and ran into people and still talk to people. And there are people that come up and say that, hey, my older brother was at this show. Like it's almost generational now.
Yeah.
Hey, I know you because my older brother played me this music. He was at your show at the Crack Shack, and I'm like, what? It was magical, magical day.
Yeah, Adam's band played the Crack Shack twice in that same time period. So like,
Cool.
I know for him, that's probably like some of his favorite shows he's ever played.
Well, it was just weird because it was like the bands that played there were like Falling Sickness, Slackers, Link 80. There was like maybe one other like kind of bigger punk band. And then it was just all like the Navajo and Hopi punk bands.
Yeah.
Who were all sick too, but like never really made it outside of the res scene.
Yeah.
And I just remember the shows just being like unhinged. Like they were really good.
Oh, kids were like wild. I mean, and that shack that it was, was like falling apart. Like, I don't know what I can remember details like about the floor just being like, what is that? It's like disintegrating under my feet,
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a great picture of you guys setting up to play the show.
No way.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Wow.
What was that band? What was that scene? This bike is a pipe bomb. Am I saying that band name correctly?
Yeah.
What was that? What was that little record label scene called? Those bands? Because the other kind of bands that played there were like bands from that scene too, which is kind of interesting. Because Adam's talking about Falling Sickness and all that. Yeah, but those bands played there too. Oddly enough.
Yeah, well, it's funny when you talk about genre crossing. It's another thing too, where people are just enjoying. They seem to be just enjoying something that like it does not have anything to do with like any sense of musical genre. Like we would play with some of the bands. We recently went out and played Shiprock. We played Shiprock, and we played with one of the bands. That's my friend Jordan's band, and like they're just this crazy, like psychotic, like metal punk, like it's just not what you'd expect to be the band that opens the show, or to mention like knowing the guys, like you just don't expect that they're going to play this like gruesome, like crazy ass music. It's like, wow, it's like you guys, and then so excited to see the Slackers, like we're going to come up and be like,
So Wasted Days, I was like, Wasted Days is 2001. Culturally, ska is kind of out of fashion at this point. But you guys get featured on NPR. It feels like you guys are kind of getting your status is sort of being elevated as the larger culture is like sort of saying, okay, we're over and done with this ska music. Is that how you remember that time period?
We did better as the ska craze ended. When the ska craze was happening, we weren't like I said, we were never on the inside track. We were always the outsiders, and people who dug us, they got it, they dug us. But we were not grabbing that zeitgeist of what people were enjoying for ska, right? And we were lucky if people just happened to show up at our show and saw us and liked us, right? When all those bands started quitting and going off the road, we took all their gigs. We took all their gigs, and we took all their fans that were looking for a gig to go to. They had been like, "Hey, we had all this great dance music for 2 or 3 years. Where'd it go? All that's left is the stupid Slackers. Now we got to go to that show." And there we were. We were there, and the people that really liked us were psyched that we were out there. And then the people that didn't know that they liked us showed up at the show, and I think half of them found out they liked us,
This period of time, from like Wasted Days on, I think you guys also really shifted gears to being like, okay, so we're going to be a road band. We're not going to be an opener anymore. We're just going to be the Slackers. We're just going to play clubs, and we're just going to build our fan base through playing consistently, putting on a good show, coming through the same town, every year, and just sort of doing it the old-fashioned way.
Yes.
Now here we are in 2023, and I feel like you guys have really shown that is an effective strategy for you guys because you're able to just tour, you're able to draw, and just kind of carve out a living playing music this way.
Yeah. I think we learned from watching bands that did a lot of opening slots. We knew some bands that were fantastic that seemed like they spent all their energy doing openings, and it didn't necessarily mean that people followed you to your own show,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the opening slot. It sounds like a great idea, and it is a good idea in the beginning of your band. You can ask the Scofflaws about how I hounded them to get opening slots. Their old sax player Mike Drance says, "Don't ever give Vic Ruggiero your phone number. He will never stop bothering you about an opening slot." It's a good strategy at first, but I got to say, grassroots, going out, playing bars. It's funny because people will say, "Oh, you come from an era that was a golden age of bands and you know being able to self promote and everything." I agree partially, but I also think that it's just as tough or easy as it's ever been, uh, depending on how you look at it. I mean, you got social media now. You can take a video of yourself playing a gig. Nobody actually has to be there except for the 10 people that are actually in the crowd. Now you can put that video on YouTube. You can share it around if you're really good at that. You can make friends with somebody that's good at it, and get your music around. Um, there's nothing like grassroots, literally going out on the sidewalk and playing and getting people that walk by and say, "Here's my record. Here, come see me tonight." It's real hustling,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the Slackers were good at that and are good.
To get people to care about you specifically, like you're saying, to develop an audience that's your audience, like that's very important, and that's like that's not necessarily easy to do. Like, and I think that's what you guys really did do in the last couple decades. Is you said like we're the slackers, we're not necessarily part of the scene or that scene or whatever, but we're the slackers. Be part of the
Yeah,
slackers scene, and people go to your shows every year.
yeah. What's funny is I remember one time in Texas, we showed up and there must have been something going on where like some local ska contingent of some tough guy ska contingent decided they were all going to show up at the Slackers gig. And I was like, "Oh, you guys have never been here before." I mean, like, we've been coming here for years, but like, who are you guys? And they all decide they're gonna like, pal around with us before the show and like, "Hey, yeah, you guys are ska. Yeah, we get it." Da da da. And I remember thinking to myself, "I'm just gonna talk a bunch of hippy dippy shit tonight to make sure that these guys know what show they're at." Because like, I'm definitely not catering to this vibe. And I was like, "Yeah, man," because like sometimes don't you just want to wear like flowers in your hair and just go around and hug people? Because like we all get along, right? We're all beautiful people, and come on, all beautiful. Let's all give each other a hug in the crowd tonight. Come on, everybody. And I remember just these guys looking at us like, "Oh, we're definitely at the wrong show." And I was like, "That's right. Make sure you know what show you're at. You're at a Slackers gig. We're not going to cater to you." Because you think we should act tough or encourage something in a certain way. Like we have our fans, and that's the reason our fans keep coming back is because they dig our vibes.
Yeah.
And same thing. They tell us too. They tell us what we like. People give me records at shows or books or talk to me about something, and they tell me something I should be checking out, and I check it out, and then I come back and maybe I got a song about it next time. It's definitely a symbiotic relationship.
It's been interesting too this last few years. Like, new bands like on Bad Time and stuff have been getting a lot of people have been paying attention to these new bands or new-ish, we should say, like Catbite and We're the Union and stuff. But you guys also like you played live on like Rolling Stone live stream. You had a Washington Post feature. You hit your new album hit #1 on the reggae Billboard chart too.
Yeah, that was exciting. That was like a funny moment of, it's kind of like in the classroom. It's like, you get a gold star today.
Yeah. I think too, wasn't it because you'd never been in Billboard, you were like deemed a new band?
We get it was amazing. I mean, we've actually charted on Billboard in the past, so I mean, it's not maybe it's 20 years ago or something, you know. But you know, props to Pirates Press. They actually did it the right way. That, you know, if you ship everything at the right time and you wait to ship things, you make it really makes it register as how many records you're shipping, instead of like shipping them all like 5 at a time every day. You never show up anywhere, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew how to do it the right way, that all the record companies do it, and so it actually was good. It gives us a little credential to work with, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, a lot of times we listen to other bands stats, you know, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, well look, this is how they came in on Polestar, and this is how many people, and this is the venues they're playing, and da da da." And we're like, man, everybody's making a big deal out of this band, but like, we played the same place as them and actually sold it out. Like, why is nobody writing about us? You know? Well, like, these guys did 10 gigs this year. Like, we did 150. Like, what's going on? Like, why is nobody noticing it? Everybody treats us like we're a bunch of schmucks. And it's like, just because, and you know, that's not to complain. I'm happy where I'm at, and I love the underground. But it's one of those things where I think we wonder sometimes, like, hey, does anybody see what's happening here? Like, you know, we just because we're not the cool guys, you know, nobody's going to put us on the cover of a magazine. You know, it's like, I remember when we saw the Strokes on the cover of the magazine. I remember it really stuck in my craw. You know, they were like, the sound of New York, you know, the Strokes. And we're like, give me a break. Who the hell are these guys? We live in New York. They're not the sound of New York. We don't know who the hell these guys are, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a rock and roll revival, or at least that's how it used to be, it's like, this is the thing that matters right now.
Exactly.
A band's playing rock and roll again. It's like, come on.
I know.
There's other things that matter.
I know. And it's, you know, I can't say that I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Yes, I did believe, and I do believe, you know, that this music, you know, that reggae and ska and rocksteady and those beats are, you know, they contain a certain undeniable beauty and value that you can't deny. I mean, it's just I don't know how to explain it. It's like a diamond, you know. It's like there's a certain tangible beauty there that cannot be argued with, you know.
Yeah.
It's just that I think everybody plays it and they don't tell us that they're playing it, you know. Like, God forbid you say that you're playing reggae. I mean, you'll just never get the respect that you deserve, you know, or that, you know, I watch all these great acts, these great reggae singers, and, you know, even bands, you know, bands like the Specials, you know, they only get the respect now, like a million years later, you know. They were always kind of a footnote because they got called the ska band, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I mean, as much as they're respected or were respected, they still, like, you could compare them to all the other like post-punk bands of the UK in that era.
Mm-hmm.
Totally not given the same
Not
place
at all.
as like,
Yeah.
like, what's the name of that band? What's any like post-punk band from the late 70s in England?
Yeah, Gang of Four.
Gang of Four. There's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Hailed. I mean, I like Gang of Four. Don't get me wrong.
Me too.
But hailed as geniuses. But the Specials, oh yeah, no, they're not bad.
Right. Right. I remember somebody telling me one time too. They were like, "Oh yeah, the Specials. Yeah, all their songs covers." And I was like, "Give me a break." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. They rip a riff from here and there." I'm like, "But come on, these guys are like visionaries. They took all these different things, mashed them together, and made this gorgeous thing that had never happened before." You know, I'm like, these guys deserve massive credit. You know, yeah, sure, they didn't have the catalog like the Clash or something. You know, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know, something about reggae. It's always gonna be stuck in a little, you know, reggae ghetto, ska ghetto. You know.
Yeah, I know. Especially here in the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do it. Then they don't do themselves any favors. It's You know, that cat bite, I got to say, just listen to their record, their recent thing, whatever it's called, Nicely Done or something like that, or
Nice one.
Nice One. And what I really like about that is it's just so rock and roll. Like the sounds are just garage rock and classic, guitar tones, and the singing is like just good singing, and it's cool. It's just like really cool. And it does something that, I kind of wish had been happening all along. And I think when we talk about the early Slackers, we just didn't have the prowess to pull it off, But I think that they have the same vision of seeing all the music having much more in common with each other. Things, seeing all of these genres having much more in common with each other than they don't have in common.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is not a big difference between all the genres people like to talk about. It's groovy music,
Don't go anywhere. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, head over to our Patreon. Thank you for listening to In Defense of Ska. Please rate and review this podcast and tell a friend. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at In Defense of Ska. Pick up Aaron's book, In Defense of Ska, at your local bookstore or online. This podcast is edited by Chris Reeves of Ska Punk International. This is your co-host, Adam Davis of Omnigon, leaving you by saying Ska now more than ever. Took down that Confederate flag.
Right down at the Statehouse.
I'm so glad that we really dug into the history behind that song. I didn't know that they'd written it originally with Rancid. I learned something today.
It's always a great episode when Adam's learning something.
That means every episode's great because I'm always learning something. You're the scholar here. I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah. So there was some really important stuff that we talked about behind the curtain.
What did we talk about over there, Aaron? Did we talk about one of our friends?
We talked about one of our friends.
Who's that?
Is Vic Ruggiero's old roommate named Sammy K.
Sammy K, former guest of the podcast and friend of ours.
Yes. He talked about on our episode what it was like to live with Vic. But what was it like for Vic to live with Sammy?
If you want to find
out. If you sign up to the Patreon, you will find out.
So listen, we've got new tiers over there, new ways where you can help be a part of this. If you haven't been over to the Patreon in a while, get over there. Support Ska. Support us.
Support us.
Ska doesn't need your support, but we do.
We need your support. So we're going to need you to just go to the piggy bank. Break the piggy bank.
Oh, man.
Get those pennies, roll them up. Go get those little things from the bank where you can get them all rolled up and you can actually spend them.
Hey, I hope your situation isn't that dire. If it's that dire, maybe I need to send you some money.
And then you can use that money.
And then you can use that money to support the Patreon.
So, Patreon subscribers, non-Patreon subscribers, listen to next week's episode.
We have Aaron Gox.
Aaron Gox. Probably in no world did you imagine this was our next week's guest. Probably because unless you live in Australia,
we could get him.
Yeah. If you live in Australia, you're like, oh my God, you got this famous comedian. If you don't live in Australia, you're like, who's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got him.
Well, we got him.
So look forward to it. And if you want to hear it early, subscribe to the Patreon. Early access. Hear the episode 4 whole days early.
4 days. You could be telling your friends about it for 4 days.
You can spoil the whole episode.
Yeah.
Don't do that though.